I gave you
Yeah.
there's a code.
I think I saw Crystal show that.
I sent it to you because this team to send it out.
Yeah.
In
That's,
case you know somebody that might want to go looking for seniors, caregivers. I think it's just a focus group.
that folks are, yeah. Oh, that'd be good.
We're providing tree route.
Is this belong to you?
I don't know what like $40 each vouchers for the first 10 seniors. Of course, lunch and then snack. But hopefully we'll get. a good
Do you have
turnout.
any extra
We already
money?
have 27 people registered for Baskerville.
Oh, nice.
Max,
So it's just having to get more folks who South County.
Yeah, so being King City,
Dude, look at that. I
we're
asked.
doing it in partnership with CISO, because the CISO, the Center for Independent.
Yeah.
So
What's your name?
we're partnering with them.
Ed Mitchell, Yannicka Stress.
So it's
Nice to meet you.
the-
Yannicka.
I want to say,
I'll send you.
Yeah.
screw that up a little.
Oh, yeah.
You have
Yeah,
some-
I think it's only been pronounced correctly on the first time, like 4 times.
I forget.
Five
I
now?
see the pronunciation.
Or why I wanted four.
No, when people read it the first time, they always pronounce it
I
wrong.
think my name must be,
It's understandable.
my name must be out there, I just didn't find it.
Yeah, it's right there.
I am.
Do you have a copy?
I do not. I know we have them at the office, so you can come by the office, but you don't have this. Correct. Yeah, This is just a meeting location. This is in our office here.
Is this the most recent or is the big one?
No, there's a more recent one.
Oh, you didn't spell my name right.
Spelled incorrectly?
Yes.
Okay. Update that for you.
Yeah, McGregor. Oh my God, McGregor, how are you? I used to study with you. Oh, good to see you. How have you been? I was not well for a while, but I'm back. Yes. Oh, yes. My
AR.
Okay, yeah,
Barnard.
actually, that'll help us remember this.
Okay, here, let's do it like this.
Yeah.
Instead.
Yeah, for sure.
Barnard.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. Usually people get the first name wrong.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened in a while.
Church appointment? No.
Yeah.
Oh, he's in there. He's
A meeting.
Yeah. With all this stuff.
Well, it's as much as you can get at 74, because I plan to already cause trouble. So it's good. But you know, good trouble. I am concerned. I do. Can I help you find your seat?
Somebody probably needs to.
What's your name?
Paula gets away.
Paula Getzman. I saw your name
I know how.
somewhere.
It's that way.
Not equality. One area.
It's in the corner. I can see them.
Corner?
Yeah.
Here.
Was that
That's
gonna
like
come back?
catching up. Yes.
No.
Oh, he was gone?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Have you seen him here? Oh, that was so nice of him. Aaron, so should I log, oh yeah, I need to log in, I'll share.
Yeah, I think I'm not host on this one, but I think you're host too.
Oh, where's Mike? Where did you come out from, Mike?
Oh, you know, always around.
Yeah,
South County doesn't have service. That's the reason I'm giving you. I'm told this policy that they can't be serviced. But I am very glad to be proven wrong. I've had very nice people on this board telling me, no, there's no such thing. That's fine.
Oh, there's Teresa. Presentation that Teresa sent it to us.
I feel like you're my friend. Nice to meet you in person. I don't remember. Hi, Todd.
Where's your
Hi,
green?
Todd. Yes, hi.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I brought my alternate and Mitchell
Sit right
in today.
next to
He'll
you.
be here as one of the, a member of the public. Just observing.
Nice to see you.
This is just one of the.
Brian, do you have the PowerPoint?
It's in the drive.
It's in the folder?
Yeah, it's in the folder.
Oh.
The committee folder.
Oh, yeah, there's, they said that we got a spot to speak to the other day. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Thought I put your message on there, and I'll sit here. And Kevin's there. I'm good. How are you?
Right, Erin, you're gonna share it or am I gonna share it? I'll get it.
You're sharing. I'm just
Oh, I'm
looking at.
sharing.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Oh, am I supposed to log in with my name or should I put no, cinnamon room, huh?
Oh, no, just your name.
Oh,
I have all the Simmons stuff set up.
Oh. You got the email. Okay, I'm just looking to. No, I'm not the host for this. Oh, you are. It doesn't let me.
You are it.
Only if I'm the host, it remembers.
Well, yeah, they are.
Let's see.
We're gonna have a new one. in October. Oh, yes. And the first one just turned.
Erin, am I supposed to mute?
Yours, yeah.
Hello, I'm well. How are you? Good to hear.
You said I gotta turn off my background, huh?
But they weren't gonna give it to me.
Test.
Here and a half, recording in progress. Yeah, everybody knows that.
With computer audio, no, huh? But not.
Knows where all of zombies are.
That's crazy.
Huh?
Like you can mute your audio.
I guess someone's like,
You can join audio, but just mute your.
She said she
even though you didn't mute it the whole time.
That's what she's
Yeah.
up to.
We had so Debbie used to live like across the street.
Yeah.
That's where I see if I can screen share.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the previous meetings they decided.
Yeah, there's like.
Right, they've been alternating back and forth.
And it was hard both, so first people didn't know where they were supposed to go and yes. Yeah, it is. So they've been able to get down.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Got back together.
Yeah.
How are you?
Very good. When are they expecting to get the horse registered back?
It shouldn't, from what I understand, it's not gonna be too long.
Maria, can I have one second? We don't have-
Waiting for you.
I'm gonna check right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
You have.
I tried it.
It's whatever's up there.
No, this.
Yeah, we're here.
Yeah. It's just.
So much.
Yeah, Diana Jimenez is-
How are things going?
Very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Sign on, give it.
Hi, how are you? I'm well, thanks. I'm Rosemary.
Nice to meet you, Mary. Right here.
Good to meet you.
Barnard, not Barnard.
Barnard and Rosemary, not Rosemary.
Chris, I think you're over here.
Your last name is easy to remember. Hold on a minute.
Oh, Barnard.
Bernard.
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry. It's not easy to remember because I'm gonna mess it up.
Just do the opposite.
Yeah.
Just, it's so phonetic. I don't know.
We need a letter.
Yeah, there's a few corporations, utilities that are like that.
Are you with Tansy then?
No.
Oh, you're the one. Oh, good. So I can ask you about this, right? Oh, so you've got an article in your house.
So it's
in
either
there.
I did 47
Turnover,
Yes.
but it's continued on page 26.
Yeah, well, is it not on in 26?
Let me see if there's a.
There's a 26.
No, good, okay.
So what they did is, Kevin is the expert. Kevin would know better to pull it up, but they borrowed against future income.
I understand. Do you know what the rate?
Yes, mine is sitting on right now.
Okay, you know that going
I don't know. Other than that.
on? Okay.
It's, but I think Kevin did a calculation that they borrowed 40 and I think we're gonna pay 60. Your total repayment, there it is, interest of 28 million, so we're gonna pay a total of 66. But the city's gonna pay.
Well, the taxpayers.
The taxpayers.
Yeah.
So
But
I,
but all, the entire debt will be paid out of. What will be allocated to
I
it?
think the city, I think the city is probably.
The city is.
Is the COP, the COP, is that being paid back by the city?
Yes, it is.
And do you know the interest rate? Hi, Kevin.
Hello. Do I know the interest rate? It varies depending, it's sold in packages. But I think somewhere, the city got a final report of what the cumulative interest rate is on it.
I'm asking.
I have my best.
Okay.
You want it?
It's like now 4 to 6 weeks.
So good to see you.
Yeah. And that's.
I'm well.
Was I run over my bike here today?
No, I'm no longer contagious.
No, I'm fine, man.
Wearing the mask.
No, you probably don't, because I don't have yours. And I only have your phone number. I could text you. Let me text you my email address.
Good, how are you?
I almost got run over on Abbott Street right now, on my bike.
Oh, on up your bike.
That road is horrible.
It is, somebody decided to take a right-hand turn into a parking lot, and they didn't check their, go behind us. Because I was in the bike lane.
Well, and you are truly committed to the cause.
I'm also very aware of my. My phone numbers.
I have your phone number, but I don't think I have my phone, which is so unusual.
Yeah.
That's a pretty.
Text me with a reminder. And
I will.
I will
do
send you all
that.
my information.
Oh, yeah, she's logged in, but it just shows that it's.
And also.
Last time I put
Maria on off of Centennial Campus.
maybe that'll work better.
I know what he was trying to do, and grateful for that. Yeah, I know, and his friend, they parted in Santa Cruz, and so he came through Centennial Canyon, and his friend was coming to home by other means. So I mean, it's just horrible and it, well, I would want it, I would ask, I want all of the data from that phone at that time, and I would want a list of every single object in the cab of that vehicle. Because it wasn't drug related, it wasn't alcohol.
Wanted to share that because I thought it was
Well,
good.
Oh, thank you. I
It could be
wondered who
speed,
put
but
it
it
down.
could be
Put it out
distracted
there.
driving.
That's great.
Yeah,
Maybe
I've
he
been
was
getting
speeding,
emails
at some point, it could be.
Yeah,
that he was
people
on the
thinking
road.
that somehow you're, I've been getting, I wondered like, thinking that you're the one in charge.
While they're driving the speed.
Yeah, so it's always nice to have a public discussion about it, so.
If you want, we can, it's not agendized, but we could discuss it at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, we could,
I think 27.
we do have an agenda item talking about money and how much
Okay,
revenue, so
let's stick it in.
we can just mention it.
Because I'm an
Right,
executive.
and for those who have questions, since I wrote it, I will answer. I assumed you had, yes, that's me.
I don't know, it just breaks my heart. when you have to do that.
It's just very sad that you know, we have so many opportunities. Just simply don't. So I live right by Star Market. Okay. So I was 68 to Toro Park. It's massively wide. It's 82 feet wide. And the travel lane is 14 feet wide or something like that. Well, why don't we narrow it? And I measured it out.
Hi, Charlie. How are you doing? Good to see you. Oh, good. Very good memory. Yeah, it was wonderful.
11-foot travel. Center.
Thanks for asking.
And the breakdown. All on the highway, but just restricted.
Yeah, I don't know. We have 86 private.
We always are.
Private driveways, and much of the road, some of the roads. There's also middle turn lanes where there's no driveways at all, but, well, it's,
Fall's a wonderful country.
Oh, I know.
Kids are back in school.
Well, that's a whole other.
My wife
Are you
was
still at
school
this
district.
email address?
I am.
Okay,
You
let's see.
have
Yes, I
it.
do.
Oh.
Okay, I'm making a note to send you all the information.
Thanks for having
There's a lot of.
Good to see you.
Oh, many of those, I just have driveways.
I know.
You know, they have.
So you sent it to me, Teresa?
Yeah, just read it in email.
I was just thinking.
Something. But they take their lives in their hands.
Yes.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I have said. The easiest fix is not to wait for the roundabouts, lower the speed limit, enforce there, and stop signs, super cheap, super cheap. Then you've got a three-way stop, and you've got those massive 8 years that have slowed down considerably. We get roundabouts in 10 to 20 years, right? But for now, let's save some lives. Was it something I said?
Not at all. Next to my boss. Can't be in 2 3-point controls and then be requesting money for one. You know, just, you know.
Yeah,
Well, like the
it's,
guy that was on the city council, was on the school board, refused to resign. Yeah, yeah. Well. That's what happened, you know, follow the rule board, that should have followed this normal.
Okay, great. I'm gonna wanna see that spreadsheet one of these days. Okay. I do love spreadsheets.
I basically Google, and then there's a guy with mad science where I figured out how to
Can you share the presentation?
dispatch report.
You have it already?
So I do a search on 10 more.
Yes, you have it? Okay.
Maria, are we ready to get started?
Yeah.
Write those down.
Okay, so.
Oh, John, what is it?
City Center, but I am a representative of the chamber, because we are a chamber member, and therefore I'm eligible to represent.
My
them.
God.
All right, everyone, we're going to get started.
Oh, everyone, Kevin, Sean is.
I got
here.
you.
Oh, you're here?
Yeah, I'm here.
I'm free.
I stuck in my bed. We got it? All right, as Kevin was saying, we're ready to get started. Maria, you're gonna call the roll for us?
Yes. League of Women Voters, Janet Brennan. Here. Alternate Howard Fosler. Salinas Valley Taxpayers Association, Kevin Dayton.
Here.
Alternate Rick Giffen. Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association, Tom Raleigh.
Here.
Alternate Rick Hewer.
Here.
Community Voice on Aging, Kayla Bumba. Alternate Teresa Sullivan. Bicycling Advocate, Victoria Beach. Here. Transit User, Jesus Valenzuela. Alternate Andrea Manzo. Monterey Bay Central Labor Council, Rod Smalley. Alternate Glenn Scheller. Central Coast Builders Exchange, Clint Fastnatch. Alternate Crystal Dell. Salinas Valley Chamber of Commerce, Greg Hammer.
Here.
Monterey Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, Jonathan Geisler. Alternate Monica Lau. Habitat Preservation, Dale Agron. Here. Alternate Rachel Saunders. Monterey Peninsula Hospitality, vacant. Monterey County Farm Bureau, Norm Group. Alternate Paul Arnado. Monterey County Office of Education, Brent McFadden.
Here.
Alternate Darren Fort.
Here.
South County Representative Paula Getzelman. Here. Alternate Carol Kenyon. Latino Organization, Chris Barrera.
Here.
Alternate Diana Jimenez. Here. North County Representatives, Rosemary Bernard. Here. Pedestrian Representative Robin Lee. Here. Alternate Lori Ivy. Youth College Representative Natalie Olivas. Alternate Gabriela Ulloa. Construction Representative Sean Hebert.
Here.
Alternate Keith Severson.
Here.
Okay, Chair, we have a quorum.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda with one item. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Actually, I think we need to do general public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
No
forgot
problem.
public comment. I'm sorry, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry. Public comment. Do we have any members of the public who wish to comment? Yes, please go ahead, state your name.
My name is McGregor Betty. I live in Salinas. I used to attend these meetings regularly when I wrote a column for the Californian about transportation.
Louder.
Okay, I will try. We don't have any.
Do we have a mic?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is McGregor Eddie. I live in Salinas. I travel by bus everywhere and train. I'm familiar with the transit authority. I was concerned about Measure X at the time when I had my column, and I very reluctantly endorsed it because the sales tax is heavier on the poor than on the rich. So it is particularly incumbent on this committee to see that the poor are not neglected in the allocation of Measure X funds. I have gone over the figures in the reports, and just done the math by population and money. My calculations show that the cities on the peninsula are getting more Measure X money than North County and South County, especially South County. I have precise examples of this, but I want to put it in a larger context Because I think this committee is well-intentioned and does not intend to have the poor drive the rich. That is what's happening. The reason for the Measure X funding was because of the loss of sale tax money, much of it due to electric vehicles, which is a wonderful advance for the environment, but shifts the burden of paying for roads, tunnels, and bridges to the poorest people who do not own electric cars. So in Carmel Valley, the gardener who drives from Salinas in his truck to mow the lawn is paying taxes, high taxes, for the road he drives on, the bridge he crosses, and the tunnels and the potholes, while the EV sitting in the driveway of the person whose lawn he mows pays no tax at all, and even gets a subsidy. Now, that is not your fault, but it does make it incumbent within that context to make sure that the poor areas of our county are not affected or pay heavier. The other factor that has to do with the injustice, in addition to the fact that all sales taxes are heavier on the poor than on the rich. Don't know that, do the research or have your committee give you a report on that. And the use of electric vehicles, which means that the poorest people in our county are paying for the richest people to get rides door to door in Pebble Beach. The first big grant that was given by Measure X was $750,000 to the Independent Transit Network, which provides rides for the elderly, which is part of the thing for the elderly. However, due to the economic conditions, our South County cities are much younger, average age 36, where you have average age 67, and the income is much lower. So I was told when I went back and checked years later to see if ITN was delivering services in South County, I was told, quote, they don't have elderly people to volunteer, therefore they cannot get these services. When I questioned why $20 million was being given for hiking trails for the peninsula, when South County is just catching up, putting sidewalks to walk on for ordinary people. Remember, equity does not mean equal. If you give the rich more of the money, that's not equal. Equitable means the people who have been neglected, like Pajaro in South County, should be first, not last. We seem to be last. Yes, there are projects, but if you look at them, they're projects that should have been done long ago. There are ordinary things that the peninsula cities have had for years, while they're getting extras. Special bike pass, 20 million. Now, the fact that it was promised ahead of time to get them to vote for it, because they always voted it down, is not a reason to screw the poor. That's not a reason. If you promise them 20 millions in lovely trails, when South County doesn't even have sidewalks, that's nice. But that doesn't excuse the obligation to see that the Measure X tax funds, which are extracted more heavily from the poor, are not preferentially given to the peninsula. And I want to tell you, I have been shocked by some of the things I've been told while I was investigating this. I have been told it's always been that way. I have been told they're too poor to get services. They don't have enough agencies to administer the services, therefore they'll do without. And the most things that has upset me is that when I bring it up, people act with outrage. Oh, we wouldn't do that. Well,
Thank you, Ms. Wilson.
will you consider these points? I will be back.
Thank you.
Actually, it's nice timing because one of the items on the agenda will be King City talking about their sidewalk and the downtown sidewalk improvement program that's funded by Measure X. So we can-
Sidewalks, right?
Thank you, Tom. All right, thank you, Ms. Eddy. Moving on to the consent agenda. I apologize for the misstep there, but we had a motion? Do we have a motion on the consent agenda again?
So moved.
And do we have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Abstain, I wasn't here.
Oh, okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, abstentions. I'm a little off my game today. All right. Our next order of business is to receive a presentation on the local Measure X projects from the city of King, from Teresa Wright and Octavio Hurtado.
Okay, so thank you and good afternoon, everyone. So I'd like to introduce to you, it's not Octavio, he is on vacation. So in his stead, we're going to have Doreen Roberto, who is the Community Development Director for the City of King City. And she is going to present to you on their Measure X projects that they've been doing in the city. And one of the things that's exciting about this, it's sort of full circle, because King City was the first city to implement a Measure X project when this measure passed. And so she's coming back to us to sort of fill you in from what's happened from that very first project they did in the city up until this last year or so. So with that, I'm going to pass this over to you, Doreen. Thank you so much for joining us. Certainly this landed in her lap surprisingly last week. And so she's been very gracious to appear and present to you today. So with that, Doreen, please go ahead.
Teresa, do you have the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, and it's up on screen and we can control. Do you want control or would you like for us to?
I'll just say next. It might be easier and less confusing if
That's
that
fine.
works. Good. Next, could we go to the second slide, please? Yeah, I want to extend apologies from Octavio Hurtado, our city engineer, public works director. He was unable to make it today, so he asked me to make this presentation. I want to say how grateful the City of King is for Measure X. The city has been able to repave and to use slurry seal on many of our streets over the last several years. As mentioned, the city was the first to complete a Measure X project in 2016 to 2017. We're excited to get started, and since then, we've had ongoing projects. So what I'd like to do is give a brief overview of the projects from 2017 to 2022. Next slide, please. The first project that I'd like to present, and this is from the funds from 2017 to 2018, we had both the street and slurry projects, the grinding and repaving of Vivian Avenue, which you can see the pictures, and then slurry applications to a particular neighborhood. And I won't mention the streets, but I do want to show what the streets, the improvements that have been made on the streets. As you can see, the street before on Vivian Drive, and then after, how much better it was. And again, we greatly appreciate that. The next slide, please. So for 2018 to 2029, again, we had a street and slurry project. Street project was on Bishop Street. So here are the pictures of what it looked like before and after, much better. And we also had a crack sealing and type 3 slurry application to the Forden Park neighborhood area and Royal Coach neighborhood area. Next slide, please. For 2019 to 2020, we had street slurry projects, again, grinding and repaving North Vanderhurst, and then a type 3 slurry applications to a number of different streets that are listed. And here is, again, while we were making the improvements before, this is North Vanderhurst Avenue. And then later you can see much improved. And not only is it easier to drive on those streets, but the appearance has really helped a great deal. Next one, please. For the 2020 to 2021, we had street slurry projects and the grinding and repaving of North First Street between various streets as listed on the slide. And then we also had a type 3 slurry application to a number of streets. And you can see that the slides we have before, or as they were going through the operation of the repaving and refinishing on North 2nd Street and after. Again, a big difference. The next one, please. For 2021, 2022, here's another example. We had a slurry project, which consisted of crack sealing and sealing and type 3 slurry application. And this is before and after in Willow Street at San Antonio Drive. Again, a big difference. Next one, please. And for our upcoming project, we have a slurry project, seal project in the Creek Bridge Arboleta subdivision development, except for the last phase of construction. We just sent this out for bid. And so you can see the areas, number of different roadways that we're making improvements to. And then the last one, please. The city continues to use the pavement management plan to develop a program to provide surface treatment to all of the 30+ miles of roadway within the 13-year plan. The city's grateful for the funds that are available for the Measure X, from Measure X, which along with other funds such as grant funding, the city's been able to make a number of major improvements to the roadway. Again, without Measure X, it would have been very difficult for the city to have made many of these roadway improvements. And we want to extend our thanks to the citizens of Monterey who passed it, and the Citizens Oversight Committee in TMC, and all others who have been involved in this. That will conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it, unless you have some questions.
Does anyone have any questions for the presenter? Yeah.
Yes, I have a compliment and a question, Doreen. First, if you could pass to the King City staff and the city council, congratulations, because in the first 6 fiscal years of Measure X operating, you have been in full compliance with all the reporting provisions that are in Measure X. So thank you for doing that. Not every local government in Monterey County is in full compliance for those past 6 years, but you are. So please let them know that that's appreciated. My question is, I actually pulled up an old 2018 capital improvement program chart that you provided to TMC. And I saw one project here on the list that isn't, I don't think it was mentioned. It was the Broadway Street resurfacing. And I wondered what the status was of that.
And I believe that was probably within our streetscape plan that we did look at funding for that. And we are doing major improvements to our historic downtown area, which includes Broadway. So if you have an opportunity to come and look at it, currently we're actually replacing some mains, utilities, resurfacing, and we're doing bulbs along that area to make it easier for pedestrians, and new landscaping. And we associated with that is a new plaza, a park that will also be associated with it. So we have been working on that. We're currently working on the Broadway right now.
Okay, so Measure X money basically is one of several funding
Yes.
components that are being used for that.
Right.
Understood.
Right. The city has looked at, because there is such a need for improvements, the city has basically pooled funding and gone after community development block grants, gone after federal grants. Of course, Measure X has been extremely important. And so we try to, we've been pooling all of that. Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions on the presentation? Yes.
Hi, my name is Greg Hammer. I'm just curious about on some of the after pictures that was before any striping was done. Were any of these facilities, or I'm sorry, any of these streets eligible for like bike facilities or anything like that, or regular striping down the middle, depending on size and throughput, I guess?
They are, and I'm glad you mentioned that. We're currently preparing a bike plan throughout the city, and we're looking at all the streets throughout the city. Matter of fact, I believe Octavio had just applied for funding for a major bike route around the city. So we are looking at that to make it, and looking at trying to get people out of their cars, of course, and use bikes. So some of those areas in the future will be striped. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Any more? Yes, Chris.
I'm just wondering, how much does it cost to do this work in a whole neighborhood like you showed in that map?
Well, it depends on, and again, I haven't been involved in it. Octavio has. I'd be happy to pass that on to him and have him provide that information to your staff.
Yes, please. Appreciate
Okay.
that.
You bet.
Todd?
Just to add to that, the city and all the cities provide in the annual report on their Measure X expenditures, which are posted on the TMC's webpage, and that does include all their expenses in the last year and the prior years. And it also includes so you can see some of the information over there posted on TMC's website. And it includes their expectations of what they'll spend their Measure X funds on the next 5 years, which does include Broadway for this year. I'm glad Kevin brought that up, because before this started, I was thinking about the downtown pedestrian curb work that's being done right now under construction. And they've already put in curb and gutter and American Disability Act accessible corners, and it looks really nice. So I think it's, it's well on its way to being completed. I also just wanted to, we sometimes look at Measure X because we're here to talk about Measure X, and it's out of the context of where it fits into all the other funding that goes into transportation. And I wanted to compliment the city of King because they do an excellent job. They're probably one of the most aggressive cities in the county going after grant funds. And so there's quite a bit of work that's done in the city that's not Measure X, so they didn't present it today, but they have been successful in getting grants. There's the Active Transportation Program, which TAMC supported them for San Antonio, which will have bike facilities and pedestrian facilities connecting, I think it's a middle school and a park down quite a ways through the city. San Antonio goes a length through the city. And then they're working on funding for a roundabout at the intersection of, is it Broadway and the 101 on-ramp, Doreen?
Yes, we are. And another project we have that we're very proud of, we've been working with TAMC on and SlowCog since 2006, and that's the proposal of the multimodal transit center on First Street. And this would be one that we would have pedestrian service through Amtrak. They've already agreed it. We're currently in negotiations with Union Pacific's. We do have engineering plans we've worked on, and we're negotiating with Union Pacific. And we do have partial funding through the state, and we're working on the rest of it for the first stage that would allow the train to stop.
So that's just another example of a non-Measure X funded project that's
Yes.
happening as transportation, and TAMC supporting the city on getting the transit service to the city. And then finally, I just wanted to mention, just for context, King City's decided the first regional Measure X project, which was the MST bus maintenance and fueling facility that was built. I think it was completed last year. And so that's another high point for the city in that and also MST, it allows them to save money by vehicles not having to drive back to Salinas to get refueled to do regular maintenance. So it's a way that we improve our regional transit system. And it's got the, it's the first regional Measure X project. So I just wanted to point that out because it's all happening in King City, and we're really, I'm really impressed by all the work the city does.
Thank you.
If I can just, Todd, if I can just add, it's also an economic benefit for the city too, because it offers jobs within that community.
Thank you. Is there anything else on the presentation? All right, thank you, Doreen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doreen.
Moving on to our next order is an update from Michael Zeller on Measure X revenues. Michael.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. I'm Mike Zeller. I'm TAMC's Director of Programming and Project Delivery. So I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but I have some information in the board or the committee agenda packet on pages 20 and 21. In particular, there's a chart on page 21 that I'll be discussing. But pleased to be back here to give an update on Measure X revenues. This was a question that had come up at the Citizens Oversight Committee in April about revenues coming in higher than what we had anticipated when we first set up Measure X. Initial estimates for Measure X, if you recall, were about $20 million a year, $600 million total over the 30-year life of the program. Over the past 5 years of Measure X, the revenues have been coming in significantly higher, even with the shelter-in-place order. Our revenues have been coming in initially at around 28 million, and that's now continued to grow up to about 38 million. We work with a sales tax forecasting firm, HDL. They're forecasting that those revenues will remain consistent around 38 million over the next couple of years. So great. Have a lot more money coming in than we had originally estimated, but still we're only at about 157 million total collected of that 600 million. So want to just kind of maintain that perspective when we're saying that we have more revenues coming in than what we had anticipated. We're still not to that total pot to fully fund Measure X. But the good news is that with the higher revenues, the local jurisdictions get 60% of those revenues, so they get that off the top, so they're getting more money than they had anticipated. But it's also additional funds that go into our regional pot that allow us to cash flow our regional program without having to go out to bond and to carry that debt service financing fees. As we were looking into the question of, well, with additional revenues, what could TAMC possibly do? Is there an opportunity for new projects or whatnot? We reviewed the policies and project descriptions, and that's linked in the staff report if you'd like to go back and look at the document itself. There was already a provision in the policies and project descriptions that allows for annual indexing that actually had not been occurring prior to this. So the chart that's in the staff report shows what indexing of the regional program, both projects and the programs, would look like if we use the same indexing rate as what we use for the local jurisdiction's maintenance of effort. The maintenance of effort every year gets indexed for construction costs. So if we apply that same indexing to our regional programs, you can see that in this upcoming fiscal year, the total program would grow from 240 million where we started up to 291, and that would allow us to cover higher construction costs that we're seeing, particularly with things like the State Road 156 Castroville Boulevard interchange project, where costs came in quite a bit higher than what was originally estimated. Doing this annual indexing would allow us to capture some of those costs. Also, TAMC staff time on the projects and other ancillary costs. So this is a policy that's already built into the program and allows us to perform this indexing annually without needing to go back to the board or anything for additional approvals. We have brought this through our executive committee. There's concurrence for the agency to continue with this indexing going forward. So this is information that we can bring back annually to the Oversight Committee as information on indexing for the regional program and how that's related to the revenues. Typically, we do that at the April meeting when we bring back information on the annual audit, so we can plan to do that again. The second question was about if there's an ability to add new projects to the program or how higher revenues could be used. That's also covered in the policies and project descriptions. There's a paragraph in the staff report kind of outlines that there's a priority that the TAMC board can use to determine how additional revenues can be used if there's a higher revenues over a average of higher revenues over a 5-year period. So we can look at covering cost increases or new features on projects. We can incorporate new technologies, and we can add, lastly, new projects to the list. Again, as I mentioned, we discussed these options with our executive committee. The consensus from the committee was to basically hold steady with where we are right now to continue to maintain our conservative approach to programming the Measure X revenues that we have in the regional pot. As I mentioned, what we have right now has allowed us to cash flow our projects without having to do any kind of debt financing. We have a number of projects coming up, hopefully for construction over the next year or so. We have the State Route 156 Castroville Boulevard. We have the Canyon Del Rey segment on Fortag. We have the Imgen Road, Imgen Parkway widening project. And then we also have a State Route 68 corridor that we're trying to get ready for the next SB1 cycle. We have US 101 south of Salinas going into environmental. So we have a lot of projects that are moving forward, and being able to maintain our cash reserves on these projects will allow us to remain flexible and make sure that they can move forward. The sense from the executive committee, or the direction that they gave us to staff, was to potentially, once we complete some of these projects, then we can kind of come back and look at where we are with the revenues to see if it'd be appropriate to readjust on certain projects or to add new projects. So wanted to bring that information back, and obviously I'm happy to take any questions. I'm sure this is ongoing discussion that we'll have with the Oversight Committee.
All right, thank you, Michael. Questions? Tom? 2 questions. Is there something on the financial impact? You're projecting that there'll be less income $1.3 this fiscal year compared to last fiscal year. What's that based on?
As I mentioned,
Who came up with that?
so this comes from our HDL, our sales tax forecasting
I
firm.
think-
So they run through a bunch of, they have their models, they get information directly from.
It's like trying to
the state.
predict, are we slipping into a recession or are we going to avoid a recession? I mean,
They're rather specific numbers for being a forecast, and these do get adjusted each quarter when we meet with them.
yeah, I hope, I'm guessing it's going to continue to be the same from last year to this year. Yeah, the other thing is, Highway 156, the PG&E got hung up. And can we have Todd, can you bring us up to date on that? How is this extra funding going to affect? Are things getting done to move that project so it can be completed?
Yes.
It was extended since the last time we met.
Yes, I can just briefly touch on that. It's the board, there was a cost increase in the overall project cost that the board did allocate additional Measure X funds to make up TAMC's share of the cost increase. And what typically happens when we get a competitive grant for a project, it fixes our share of the cost. So when the cost goes up, we have to cover our share increase. PG&E, we were able to successfully get the California Transportation Commission give us the 12 additional months to bring the project to construction. And PG&E has been delivering on their material to date. I believe they're supposed to complete their engineering work by December. And that allows some time for Caltrans right away to follow up on it and then for the project to go out to bid for the construction. There are some intermediate delivery steps, and one of them was for their preliminary engineering work to be delivered to Caltrans by the end of last month, and I believe that happened. So so far so good. We're kind of in a tough situation where if they slip, we can't do much about it, but it seems like they are at this point moving forward with the current schedule.
I mean, if I see another commercial by Peggy, whatever her name is, about burying cables, I think I'll throw up and throw my shoe through the TV set.
Yeah, you and me both.
Yeah.
Will be the first project held up by PG&E. Do we have any more questions on Michael's report? Oh, yes.
To this. It kind of remotely relates. All right. In the original Measure X, did that allocate the percentage of population in miles specifically?
Yes,
And what was the percentage?
it was 50% population, 50% miles.
Okay.
And just to clarify, maybe Mike, can you explain what this is for the rest of the community?
So this is an article that was written in the Salinas Valley Chamber of Commerce Business Journal about, primarily about how Salinas has been spending their Measure X funds on sidewalk improvements and street improvements. And there's some information on a breakdown of Measure X on the following pages for all of the jurisdictions. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Kevin Dayton had a hand in the article.
Yes, almost everything except a little bit added at the beginning and end by editors was written by me.
So because it was Measure X related, we thought we'd share it as correspondence. And I think you asked about the formula, and it does have the table 1 that shows the distribution, a kind of comparison between distribution of Measure X by jurisdiction based on a per person amount and then as a road mile amount. I thought that was an interesting way of showing the information.
Are there any more questions? Yes.
Just a clarification. On your chart here, you've got these indexes that are popping up 26, 137, 125, I'm sorry, 127, et cetera. Inflation seems to be a little bit more than that in some of these areas. And all these projects are running, a lot of them are not even coming into the estimated engineer's bid. Do you think that the funding that is being generated, I mean, 38 million is nothing to sneeze at, but is that keeping up with what we think the contractors are bidding on and inflation, or are we gonna find ourselves in a hole in a couple of years where things are exceeding, the spending is exceeding the revenue generation?
Well, that's, we do maintain a cash flow model specifically for that purpose. The indexing that you see here, this comes from the engineering news records, construction cost index for they have 20 different cities that they index, and this one comes from the San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay.
So it is relatively specific to our area. It
Should be
comes from
pretty
a
good.
Technical journal that tracks this information. As we continue to do the indexing annually, we'll be able to hopefully keep up with inflation based on those numbers. If we get to a point where construction prices are well exceeding what we had anticipated and what we had budgeted, we'll have to reevaluate where we are at that point.
Thank you.
I think, any more questions?
I do.
on Michael? Oh, yes, go ahead.
Hi, so in Castroville received a grant to fix and improve the Merritt Street, the 183 area. It's a small area, but it is in need of bad repair. Is there any connection to Tansy with that grant project? And if so, do you have an update on when that will begin?
So that project is funded through the state's State Highway Operations and Protection Program. So there was about $20 million from the shop, is what it's called, towards that project. TAMC did provide an additional $2 million that we had from one-time COVID relief funding that we received. In recent discussions with Caltrans, it sounds like their current budget on the project, they should be able to finish it within the 20 million that they have in the shop, and they may not need that 2 million from COVID relief. So we're discussing where that funding could potentially be reprogrammed to. But we have been coordinating closely with them. We had submitted comments, I believe specifically Yannicka Strauss had reviewed the project and made some comments on bike and pedestrian improvements. The project currently is in design. They have run into some unforeseen issues with needing to construct some new retaining walls and some additional design work that's needed on the project. So there's actually additional funding from the state that they're seeking that's being considered tomorrow by the California Transportation Commission to help them finish up the final design. And then once that process is done, they'll be able to go into construction. So I'm not sure of the exact timeline, but I believe that they're close to finishing the design process.
First step is the design project, and then after that,
And then they would do design
timeline.
and right of way. I know that along the right of way, there's some private easements that they need to secure. Once all that's completed, they would go into construction.
And this is with the California Transportation Commission.
There's a consideration for additional funding that the project is seeking. That's with the California Transportation Commission. They're requesting $700,000. A majority of that, about $350,000, was in relation to the new retaining walls that are needed. There's some utility coordination. We're talking about PG&E and other utilities. $210,000, I believe, for utility. And then there was some additional cost for the design team to finish their engineering.
Thank you so much for the information.
Is there anything else on Michael's report? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Do we have any, yes, announcements and or comments? No? Oh, yes, okay.
I'd like to request a report to reflect what Mrs. Eddy requested at her public comment.
That something that we can do.
That's something, yeah.
Who would do that?
What do we, so we have her comments on the record, so what is the report that you want back?
Ms. Eddy, you had requested a report.
Yes.
Can you let us know what?
We can talk. We heard her comments in public comment, and we can talk offline. Covered quite a range of topics, both related to Measure X and not related. So we'll work on defining it in a way that fits the oversight committee.
Great, great. And also, King City, they're doing a lot of great work. Their map with the whole neighborhood, that's pretty awesome. But a few miles away from there in San Oro and San Lucas, what do we have to do to get some work done over in those communities? I'll just ask.
It's the county.
We can have a county report back on that, but just briefly, we have been supporting the county and they've been successful in receiving some active transportation program grants that will do quite a bit of work in Senator San Lucas, Chular, and I believe Castroville. So there are kind of, it is like I said, hard to describe everything in total versus Measure X specific. But we could ask the county to report back about those areas.
Okay, and also Pajaro as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Okay, and also, just one other thing, the work that's being done on Blanco in Salinas, is that part of the Salinas Fund or is that the county? Because somebody told me that was part of the old highway.
I believe that's
Anybody
the
know about
county.
that?
It is the county.
County, huh?
Sign up.
Yes. Okay, yeah, I was asked that question. I didn't know. That's about it for me. Thank you.
I'd actually like to elaborate on Chris's comments. I think if we have a report at the next meeting about some of the questions that came up today, I think actually all these can be answered. One question I think would be interesting to know is there any background information on why the TAMC board came up with the 50-50 formula of basing funding for the local governments on miles of highway versus population? I'm going to guess without actually being there in those internal conversations, in order to get a ballot measure passed, you got to have everybody on board. The thing is, there's one thing about being, principled on policy, and then there's a reality of actually getting things done in politics. And it was the 5th try to get that tax increase when it actually happened. And it was done because a lot of different parties, including many parties in here, were willing to do some give and take to get on board with things. And in the previous 4 efforts, there was always a powerful special interest group that didn't get exactly what they wanted. They fought it. So I think it might be good to explain the 50-50 formula. And the interesting thing on the charts is, if you notice, the charts of ranking the cities based on population and then by miles of highway, it's almost completely reversed. So in some ways you can look at that and say, you know what, if you're going to try to work out something where everybody's going to be a little bit dissatisfied, which I think is how you do public policy in practice, that was probably a good approach. But it might be good to have a rationale for that, because I was called by a reporter a couple months ago saying, hey, you're on the Oversight Committee and I heard an accusation that you're neglecting the poor. And anyway, I think this is good information. The other issue that Chris brought up, which was mentioned earlier, was the South County issues. And you brought that up before. And actually the points that were made, but in the public comment explaining why this is the case, are points that have been made up before. And it might be worth, first of all, this actually falls within, in my opinion, the TMC board of directors rather than the Oversight Committee. But maybe it'd be useful to have something in writing that can be passed around in South County among the elected officials saying, you know what, we struggle here on the Oversight Committee to make sure all the geographical areas are widely served, because there are some fundamental issues in South County that really we can't do anything about. If there isn't an organization there to do things and volunteers don't do things, that's up to the community leaders to say, how can we reverse that? And I think it might be good to have something in writing, then have it circulate around, and then some of the local community leaders, whether they're political, business, or otherwise, might say, hey, you know what, maybe we should organize something and change this around.
And at the risk of abusing the chair, I'd just like to restate Chris's comment to just say that in light of the excess revenue that we do have, I believe what you were saying is that we could have the board take a look at structures in which perhaps they could use the excess funding to address some of the inequities that are inherent in a sales tax. Would that be fair to say, Chris?
Yes, yes, and I would also like to add, if I may, a few years ago, we had brought up the disabled transportation program in South County. And what Miss Eddie brought that up today. And so she notices it. And so in my opinion, that hasn't been taken care of yet. So I would like to bring that matter up again.
Chair, could I comment also on, oh, sorry, I don't know,
I'm-
on the same topic?
Yeah, I'm done.
Oh, well, I don't
Go
know,
ahead,
you on the same topic?
Go ahead and comment.
Can I, on that same thing? I think Todd, also this is directed to you. I think you were starting to say, this is something we've all brought up over the years in other contexts. It's always good to see the ratio of the measure X to whatever else it stimulates. And so I think what you were saying, Todd, is that maybe that's not information that you have full access to or that's easy to access. But I just have a question in my mind from Ms. Eddy and everybody else's comments. Is it possible that Measure X performs a different function in different communities in the sense that maybe there's more leverage for the same, for a less amount in certain communities? I don't know. Or maybe there's no source of any other grants or whatever in certain communities, so it has to be Measure X. But I think without understanding the sort of triggers that it induces in other funding sources, we get a lopsided understanding of what's being done. So I don't, again, Todd, maybe you can't, maybe this is beyond TAMC's scope to figure out, I don't know, but I think for me anyway, that would help me see the bigger picture and help me understand the nature of Ms. Eddy's concerns. And
It's something that we would like very much to be able to share and convey. It's actually very hard to put it together in a perfect picture.
Yeah.
But it's what we spend our career on, is keeping track of all the money and trying to get all the projects funded and supporting all the jurisdictions and getting their goals done. And Measure X certainly helps leverage all of the efforts and gets a lot done that wouldn't have been done otherwise.
But for example, in the presentation we saw today, I'm left not really knowing what percentage of that was Measure X, what would have gotten done with or without it. And I know that's something we've come back to a lot. I just think we're not getting the full picture in this equity question unless we understand that a little bit better. And I don't know what to do if that's really hard to access, but I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, and I agree. And I also think it's difficult. All of our jurisdictions are short-staffed, and particularly the South County cities. And to ask them to take time to do a bunch of analysis to show how all this fits together is really not practical. They're out there just trying to get their projects done. So we'll do our best to put that together within our ability to have a bigger, more complete picture.
Thanks.
Yeah, I wanted to comment. One of the things in the minutes from last time was I raised the issue about the so-called east side bypass, the alternate route between the peninsula and Salinas. We have two main routes, Highway 1, Blanco, Imson Parkway, Reservation Road, Davis Road, and Highway 68. And eventually we know there's going to be some major projects on Highway 68, and we're going to be desperately looking for that third alternative route. We need to get a report from somebody, and leaving this up to you, Todd, at the high level on TAMC, to say that they're really thinking about this, because I've asked my supervisor and I get this expression back. It's not on the radar screen of our leaders who are supposed to be looking 10 years into the future. That's what I've found. The other thing is, I occasionally read in the paper people talking about light rail. A light rail would be great. They're trying this in Honolulu. They started it back with a ballot measure in like 2004, 2005. It was going to cost $3 billion for 20 miles. The latest estimate, worst case estimate, is 13 billion with a B for 20 miles. And they haven't even figured out the final design. And they opened up part of it for free. And it's costing $54 for one passenger a day. And they're trying to figure out how they're going to subsidize this to keep it running. It just started in the end of June, July. It's basically, it's one of these things that sounds really great. And the politicians promise it and it doesn't pan out, and the ridership is not panning out. Poor design, whole bunch of reasons, but I get a report of this every week and it just is not working out. But before somebody says, let's do light rail, they really need to think about the consequences when a project goes from 3 billion to 13 billion and it's still not finished 20 years later. And they've raised taxes. And so I just want to caution you, people say light rail, you say you need to figure out what you're talking about because the cost is just astronomical.
Chair.
Thank you.
But just a second, excuse me, Jen. We're getting way beyond public comment and announcements. I would suggest if someone has another comment or announcement relative to the agenda, to let them make that. Otherwise, to complete the meeting, adjourn the meeting. And I'm happy to stay and talk about transportation all afternoon if anyone else wants to stay and ask questions, but we should probably wrap the meeting up.
I have a question going back to the allocation of extra funds. Based on my understanding, it would be allocated based on the existing formulas.
So there's the 60-40 split between regional and local jurisdictions. So that formula is still there. And then we're talking about the 40% regional, how that would be allocated. And what the current direction we're going is based on the cost index and increasing all of the projects and all of the programs based on those index numbers that are in the staff report. And then if there, at some point, as we retire a few projects, complete them and fully make sure they're fully paid for, if we have any additional funds available, it will be a discussion with the board whether any of the existing projects need more money to be completed, or if they want to introduce a new project, that would be the discussion at that point.
So at this point, is there that amount for discretion of the board?
We're not recommending that at this point because we have several of the regional projects, most of the regional projects haven't been built. Several of them are going to be built in the next few years. There's several points in a project where you have cost estimates and you actually don't know the cost of the project until it's been completed and all the paperwork's been closed out. There have, as an example, the Salinas Road interchange on Highway 1 up towards Pajaro. There was a dispute with the contractor that went through a process that took almost 2.5 years before finally it was decided that additional money was owed the contractor. And TMC had to pay a part of that because it was a grant that we had a formula share of. So that's the worst case scenario. It'd have to be 2, 3, 4 years after the project's finished and have to come up with some money to finish it.
The reason for my question is that it was suggested that consideration be given to the extra funds for reallocation. And it sounds based on what you have said that there's not a lot of discretion there. Is that correct?
If we get to a point when we truly feel and recommend and the board agrees that there is additional money to reallocate to projects, it could be to a new project. And that is something that this committee will be talking a lot about, and it has to make a recommendation to the board.
But what's the time frame for that? Future years or now?
Future years.
That's what I'm trying to get clarity on. So what you're saying is right now, in terms of using the inflationary extra we don't have a discretion. Because it was recommended by somebody that we look at different ways of allocating the, based on your report, they're saying we don't have that kind of discretion at this point. So in addressing this issue for the next agenda, you might describe all of that.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make it really quick.
Okay.
Does the county keep track, or is there something on the county website that keeps track of all the TAMC money they have received and where it's spent? And if not, can we ask the county for that? But if there's already such document that exists that I'm not aware of, I apologize, I'm new. But if you guys could point me the right way.
It's actually posted on the TAMC website.
Okay.
If you go to the Measure X tab on the TAMC website and you look at the local annual reports for Measure X.
And it just tells me what projects they all spent it on, and that'll tell me the area where it went.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you, sir.
Okay, and it also includes what they expect to spend it on for the next 5 years.
Even better.
And that's true for all the jurisdictions. But it's not, it is, they do have discretion to change that in the future.
Sure.
But it's all what their expectations are.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
One more comment, maybe for research for the next. But also I want to support what Kevin, Victoria, Chris, and McGregor are suggesting, that we get some kind of report. It doesn't have to be too complicated. Like, what is the whole picture in regards to why some areas, at least on the surface, looks like they get more TAMC or Measure X money than others? And is it really an issue of leverage? Because we know, like, as one of you mentioned, some areas, especially the unincorporated areas, really don't have the manpower and resources to apply for grants and funding like that. So while others might have, more manpower and can leverage and apply for grants and things like that. So I think there is, it doesn't have to be like real complex, but just to give us a bigger picture so we can address the equity issue. And then just second, if you could please research, and it may not even be related to this, but the project you mentioned, or I mentioned in Castroville, the 183 project, that there might be excess money that may not be needed by that particular project. Could that money be reallocated and stay in Castroville, because there's so much missing sidewalk, curb, and gutter in that little community? And so could it be reinvested? And you don't have to respond today, but just maybe something that could be researched.
All right, thanks. If there's no more announcements or comments, we will proceed to adjourn. To our next, we don't need a motion to adjourn, do we? No. So our next meeting, Tuesday, October 17th at 2 p.m. Right here in the cinnamon room.